Moving abroad, 10 things I wish I'd prepared for. Hi, my name is Ben. I've been living abroad. I've been living overseas in a foreign country for the past 5 years. This video, I'm going to list 10 things I wish I'd prepared for better, 10 things I wish I'd done a little bit different before moving abroad. This list is in no particular order, and maybe you agree and maybe you would disagree with some of the things on it, but this is just the 10 things that I wish, on reflection, I prepared a little bit better for. So number one is the language barrier. So I wish I had taken a little bit more time in learning some of basic phrases and greetings and all that kind of thing. I wish I had taken perhaps a few beginner crash courses, classes in person back home before I'd moved abroad. I did buy a phrase book, but when I arrived, I quickly realized I'd not really heard any of the words being spoken. And this is a different language with a different alphabet, different tones, different phonics. Some are the same, so there's some crossover, but some of them are completely different and don't appear in the other language. So on reflection, I definitely wish I'd taken a few classes. Even if that was a few online classes, I wish I'd done a few of those. Or at the bare minimum, I wish I'd spent a little bit more time online on perhaps YouTube or some other application, listening to the language or listening to the basic phrases I was trying to learn. I wish I'd taken some time in listening to how they sound before I moved out here. Number two is culture shock. I wish I'd been a little bit better prepared for the cultural differences and the culture shock of day-to-day life in the country I was moving to. Once again, I had bought like a travel book that didn't really set me up for the day-to-day lifestyle that was gonna sort of hit me. So once again, I wish I'd spent a little bit more time. Perhaps I could have found someone online who could have broken down some of the culture shock for me, some of the things to expect, some of the things to be prepared for. Or at the very least, perhaps I could have found blogs of expats who had done the same move from the same country or from similar countries, and I wish I'd listened to them, listened to how they dealt with culture shock and the things that they found most tricky. So as I mentioned, I was left only with travel guides, book, and they didn't really prepare me for the culture shock of day-to-day life or work life. I wish I'd spent a little bit more time researching cultural differences so that I could mitigate some of that initial culture shock I felt when I first got out here, and especially when I started working. Number three is the housing market. I wish I'd spent a little bit more time researching the housing market, looking at some different options online before I moved out here. To be honest, for my first 6 months, I ended up signing a contract that was way too long. It was fine, it wasn't too overly priced. However, I could have got a much better place for that price. I could have probably had a small house for the price I was paying for a very small condo room. So I wish I'd spent some more time, once again, online on property blogs or property websites, I should say. I wish I'd researched the housing market. I wish I had better knowledge of what was on offer and what was the price. I think if I had have done that, I would have had a better idea what to expect, what to look for, and what price to expect to pay for that amount. So yeah, with a bit of research, I think I could have had a much better or gotten much more for my money if I'd done a little bit more research into the housing market. Number four is the job market. I wish I had researched the job market much more thoroughly before I moved out here. To be honest with you, I took the first job that was offered to me. I wish I had researched the job market in more detail, because as it turns out, and I didn't find this out till I'd already moved here, there are quite heavy restrictions to foreign nationals in the job market in the country where I'm living. So perhaps you will find the same thing online, and that may influence you to choose somewhere else. Not only was I unprepared to find out that the job market was pretty heavily restricted to foreigners here, also, if I had done a little bit more research on the job that I was actually taking, I would have better understood the qualifications that were preferred. In doing so, perhaps I could have done an extra year of study, perhaps I could have picked something else, got a different type of certificate. With a little bit more research and perhaps with an extra year or two studying, then I would be in a better position to find new jobs in the same industry in the future, had I known which qualifications were preferred. Number five is healthcare. So something else I definitely should have researched more was the healthcare service in the country I was moving to. I got pretty lucky. The country I live in has perfectly good hospitals, although they are private, so that's something to consider, especially if you're coming from a country that has national health care service. So like I said, even though I got pretty lucky, the country where I moved to has a perfectly good healthcare system. It is private predominantly, especially for foreign citizens. So one thing on top of researching the healthcare as a whole, under this umbrella, is that I wish I had looked into health insurance a little bit more. I kind of took traveler health insurance, and that probably wasn't the right health insurance for me because I was employed, I was coming here to work. So I wish I'd spent a little bit of time looking into local health insurance plans. Obviously they have them. I wish I'd investigated that more, and I would have, from the get-go, been on a better health insurance package, and that would have been a much better, much safer route that I wish I had done. Number 6 is transportation. If you're going to be living or working in a foreign country, then you definitely need to consider day-to-day transportation. Maybe you live in a big city, maybe there's perfectly good train, bus, taxi, motorbike taxi, tuk-tuk transportation that is adequate for you and you can afford to use. Maybe there's a very reasonably priced SkyTrain, which is better and quicker at getting through the city because you don't get stuck in the traffic. But if you're outside of the bigger cities like I was, and you move to a country that predominantly uses motorcycles, let's say, like in the country where I live, I wish that I had probably spent a little bit of time before I moved out here getting familiar with a motorcycle. I had a car license, I didn't have a motorcycle license. In fact, I never sat on a motorcycle before I moved abroad. On reflection, it could have been a big advantage for me to have taken some motorcycle classes in the UK before I moved out here and before I went abroad, if I'd have planned this far in advance. And even if I were to take it a few steps further, if I'd got my driving license for motorcycles in the UK before I moved out here, it would have been a much quicker process of getting my driving license in my new country. If I already had one from my home country, then it would have forgone some of the things I needed to do to get my local driving license for a motorcycle. Definitely something to bear in mind and to consider and to plan for. Number 7 is visas. So I definitely wish I had a better understanding of the different visa types. I definitely wish I knew what was required for each visa type, because I think this would have allowed for me to make some of the decisions that my agency made for me. Also, like I said, some of those requirements I had no idea about. I sort of learned going along as I did. Something very common I see is people who start work and aren't informed by their agency or by their school is things like 90-day reporting, for my specific case, and the re-entry permits. So there's a lot on top of your visa also, so it's not just the different types of visas, it's also the requirements on those types of visas that you really should try and get a little bit of a head start and research before you move out somewhere. I was lucky, I made some friends pretty early on who were able to guide me and let me know. Otherwise, I would have probably been fined or worse if I'd not met some of the requirements, not done some of the things that I had to do for my visa. Like I said, I got fortunate, but I do see a lot of new people who come out here typically will miss something and end up getting fined or end up having to pay extra for something. So you definitely want to do your own research. Even though your employer will probably cover the cost of the visa and say it's all sorted, you definitely want to be knowledgeable about the subject, because that would put you in a much better position for making decisions, and also could potentially save you paying some fines. So whichever country you're going to, definitely do a bit of a deep dive into the visas, and specifically the visa you think you're probably on and the requirements for that visa. Number 8 is climate. I wish I had researched the climate somewhat better. I wish I'd thought a little bit more. I wish I'd found some YouTube videos about this kind of thing. To be more specific, I wish I had planned better, got better protective clothing. I wish I'd bought a sun hat much sooner. I wish I had got better protective sunglasses much sooner. I wish I'd brought some long sleeve t-shirts, which I would never have thought of, but they're actually pretty essential, to be honest, when you're living in a much hotter climate than you're used to. It's kind of counterintuitive, but a long sleeve t-shirt is essential wear in my opinion, so like the occasional jacket. Also, if you're like me, living somewhere that has like rainy seasons, a really solid raincoat is kind of essential wear for a large portion of the year. So I wish I'd been better knowledgeable on the climate so that I could packed and prepared better for the move. I'm sure I could have found guides on YouTube and that kind of thing, and also personal blogs that would have explained and broke this down much better for me. And also bear in mind that if you move to a different continent or something like that, it might be difficult to get your sizes or your preferred brands and that kind of thing. So it can be a challenge. I kick myself every day thinking about some of the raincoats I left in the UK initially that I wish I had with me for rainy season, but you live and you learn, and hopefully you can learn from this video and not make the same mistakes I made when packing to move abroad. Number 9 is food and diet. I actually live in Thailand. Thailand is world renowned for their food, but even I wish I had prepared a little bit better initially when I moved out here to do with food and diet. I wish I had learned some of the key phrases, some of the words around food, so I knew exactly what I was getting when I was ordering stuff in a restaurant. I wish also that I prepared a little bit or thought about sort of day-to-day eating habits. So if you rent a condo in some parts of the world, it won't necessarily come with a kitchen, so you need to definitely think about those things. You need to perhaps consider electrical appliances you can buy and maybe get used to cooking on those and thinking of dishes that you can cook that are pretty simple until you get a set up for yourself. So I wish I planned for that much better, because at first it was a bit of a struggle. I was eating out all the time just because I didn't really know what to do, didn't really have a good plan, hadn't really thought it through. And it also took me a while to figure out sort of the dishes I liked and all that kind of stuff. So I wish I'd maybe spent a little bit of time considering the food and my dietary needs before I moved out. Obviously, this is going to be a much bigger concern for anyone with dietary restrictions or personal diet choices. Maybe there's things you don't eat. Definitely look into that before you move to a different country, because not everywhere can support a vegan lifestyle or a nut allergy lifestyle that well. So definitely want to look into those things and see if it's compatible with you, where you're planning to go. Number 10 is I wish I had tempered my expectations and been better prepared for the reality of everyday life. Ultimately, you're only going to figure out the reality of your situation of living in a new place by experience, I think. So it is a little bit tricky to prepare for. Once again though, I wish I'd spent a little bit of time following some blogs, some YouTube, some Instagram. Obviously, we live in the age the digital age of information and social media. I could definitely got a window into people's lives who are living in the country where I was moving to, for have a better expectation of the reality of living and working in the country where I do. I would even go as far as say I wish I'd moved out maybe a few weeks in advance for me starting work. When I moved out here, I had like an introduction sort of thing for a week, and then I was basically starting work, sent off to where I was going to be living for the next year or so. So I wish perhaps I'd spent, a few weeks. I wish I'd come here a couple of weeks early, sort of giving myself a little bit of extra time to sort of sink into the reality and get used to things, rather than just being thrust straight into work. So that's something else I could have done a little bit better that I wish I had done. If moving abroad is something you're interested in and want to know how to move abroad, then check out this video right here. I made a video called How to Move Abroad in 2023, so maybe this video is something you will be interested in. So yeah, click here.